Can you see me now?
Yeah, I can see you just fine. Am I coming through?
Yeah, could use a little more light on you. You got any little more light for us?
Maybe. Let's see. Let me kind of tilt this up a little bit.
Although you got a really sharp picture, man. I like your camera.
Oh, thank you. Let's see if I can shift around a little bit.
Hang on, everybody. He's going to shift to see if we can get a little light going. That's fair enough. Here we go with that there. Good-looking guy like yourself, you got to be all lit like I am. Well, Brandon, welcome to the program, and we're going to be talking about Ozark healing and ancient methods, and that's been developed by the hillfolk way down in there. So now let's just begin by talking about you live in the Ozarks, is that right?
Yeah. So I'm in the Arkansas Ozarks, northwest Arkansas, and for those that don't know, the Ozarks it's a big area. It is in Arkansas, but then it goes up into Missouri, almost all the way to St. Louis, and then over into Oklahoma a little bit, and down into or up into Kansas and down into Oklahoma a little bit. So it's a really big area, sort of joined together by these mountains and plateaus.
Okay. Well, you're talking to a friendly neighborhood here because I was in Russellville, Arkansas for a while, and that's pretty much in the Ozarks there. And
yeah, it is.
And but so yeah, I mean, Arkansas is a beautiful place. Don't they? What do they call it? The gem state? What do they call that?
Arkansas, the natural state.
The natural state, and it is an absolute natural wonder, man. I love the color of the rivers, and I mean they just
color.
They just come right out of the mountains there. And in fact, me and my wife went and traced one up. We went far back into the hills as we could go, and it's fun to find the actual very beginning of those rivers coming right out of Mother Earth, the cleanest water you could ever drink. And I got to feel like there's a lot of minerals in there. It's probably better than any kind of city tap water for sure. So, yeah. But you live there now. Somewhere along the way, you started studying about healing methods. How'd that all begin?
So for me, it really goes back to childhood. I grew up with Ozark parents. My grandparents are from here, great-grandparents. So we had a lot of traditions, a lot of weird home remedies and things that at the time I didn't really think anything about. I just, that was just what we did. When, if you get sick, you don't go to the doctor, you take home remedies, things like that, herbal remedies. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't really think anything of it until I got to college, and I took a folklore class, and we studied Vance Randolph, who is probably the best known Ozark folklorist. He wrote a book, Ozark Magic and Folklore, back in the 40s. And so we were studying the text, and I was looking through, and he was talking about all of these traditions that my family had. That was the first point where I really, something clicked, and I was, thinking, there's something to this. There's a culture here that I didn't know was here. Mm-hmm. So then I wanted to really update the story from the 40s. Nothing has really been written about Ozark magic, folklore, healing traditions since Vance Randolph in the 40s. History has been covered since then, but nothing about our healing traditions. Mm-hmm. So I started with family, collecting stories, and kind of worked out from there, started going through the Ozarks to different communities and meeting with old timers and modern practitioners alike. And really my work kind of became something different because I realized that I myself could be a practitioner, could be a healer. Mm-hmm. And so it kind of turned from documenting folklore and things like that to really keeping these practices not just for my own sort of collection, but to actually be able to use to help heal people. Mm-hmm. And also to help people reclaim their sort of cultural heritage and mm-hmm. healing practices.
It seemed like to me that mirrors what happens on Indian reservations, as the shaman or the healer there, they seem to be obviously disappearing, and their knowledge is going with them. And now when I go to the wellness center to work out, there's a sauna room there. It gets real hot, and it has stones in it, the heating up everything. And I know that's directly from the Indians, man. They used to have the tents with the stones, and you sweat profusely, and that a lot of bad things are coming out of your body during that time. But I'm very interested in ancient methods of healing, the way that God intended. I mean, what's the odds of, and really good pharmaceuticals anyway, aren't they all plant-based in some way, and then they become synthetic? And I think that's maybe the drawback. When they become synthetic, there's other things that happen because they've gotten off the natural, because it's quicker and easier and higher profit margin to produce. But I'd rather go back to the old ways. And I just feel like the ancients had solved a lot of our health problems, but it's just being lost. So I do appreciate you trying to keep that back, or at least keep it alive. Now, have you seen direct healings from what it is you do?
Yeah, I mean, we have to ask, what do we mean by healing? So, I'm not, as a part of my work, I'm not curing cancer. I'm not, I'm not taking tumors out of people, things like that. Although I have met traditional healers in the Ozarks that do things like that. That has just never been my calling. What I kind of found to be my area is really as a representative of that other side of the healing process. So traditionally in the Ozarks, people didn't really make a separation between healing the body and healing the spirit or healing the mind. Those things went hand in hand together. So if you are giving somebody an herbal remedy, you'll pray over the remedy. Or if you're giving somebody, some treatment, traditionally healers would stay in people's houses with them. They would make sure that their kids were looked after. They would make sure that their house was clean, things like that, as a way of really engaging the person in their own healing process.
Well, Brandon, when you say keep your house clean, are you talking about keeping it clean, or are you talking about keeping it clean from evil spirits?
A little bit of both. So yeah, a healer would definitely be there to look at the signs or the tokens, as we call them, which are omens, things like that. So if they're working on somebody and there's a crow that caws outside, they'll listen to that. And
that's why let me get into this little area right here, because I'm tremendously interested in omens. And by the way, for those of you watching the program, if you've ever, we use the word omen in this conversation here, but if somebody's had an omen that they know is an omen, just short, succinct little thing, put it in the live chat, or Jade sent it to me, one of the two. We try to see if anybody's had some omens. So talk about omens. What are they and where they come from?
So there's a lot of different sort of beliefs about them. So a lot of people think that they are messages from the other side. So specific healers might look for omens and things and connect that to their work with angels or with ghosts, things like that. So it is otherworldly entities that are sending messages for specific people to pay attention to. So there's a folk belief, not just for healers, but there are things like if you see butterflies, that's a message from an ancestor or a spirit of the dead trying to call out to you. There's a belief that if you see a cardinal, a redbird pecking at your window, that can be a warning. It can be a warning from a departed loved one that danger is near, or in some cases, it's actually an omen for your own death. So some people think that.
Wait a minute, that's the cardinal?
Yeah, and so
crap, Brandon. I've been feeding cardinals sunflower seeds all winter long, man. I don't want the cardinal of death flying around here.
Well, I guess it's only an omen if. Omens, they're random events. They're not connected to, normal day-to-day processes. That's why they stand out. So the tales that I've heard, it's always been people that, didn't see any redbirds around for a while. And then all of a sudden, a redbird wasn't just in the window, but pecking in the window. And in one story I heard, the lady who ended up not dying, but it was an omen she felt of an experience she had. She had a car wreck a few weeks after this, and so she thinks it was connected to the cardinal, but she scared it away because she kind of knew this omen. She scared it away, and it kept coming back and pecking. So omens are typically things that are very eerie. They're out of the ordinary. It's not likely to be something that just happens all the time. But healers would look for these omens during the healing process, and in a lot of cases, it would determine how they continue to work. So, if you were an herbalist or a yarb doctor, as they were called, you might be healing a person with plant medicines, and then you get a certain sign or a token, and that might switch your thinking. You might actually send them to somebody who works with prayers or charms or rituals, because it could be an omen of a magical illness instead of a physical illness. So it all kind of goes back to that sort of diagnosis process. But the work that I do, I've kind of found myself in as a representative of that spiritual side of the healing process.
Well, I can tell you, Brandon, anytime I've ever been to the doctor, not one time has the doctor prayed over the medicine or asked me how's my spirit man inside doing. All he just said, hey man, we're going to shoot you up with some drugs and that type of thing there. So let me, I think I might have an omen. I see people in the live chat have a little bit of trouble understanding what the question is. So is this an omen? Now, one time I was out cutting the grass, and in the middle of the grass, I had an unction that I just want to talk to God. Okay. So I said, God, if you're out there, show me a sign. And I'm just parked in this tall grass, and I look, and then right next beside me was this gigantic praying mantis sitting there praying, like 3 inches from me. And I'm thinking, wait a minute now, was that an omen?
Yeah, that can be an omen. Omens are just sort of signs, and they're always from the natural world. And there's this belief in the Ozarks that, a lot of times nature knows best. Nature is naturally sort of connected to these sort of otherworldly places. And so, the things of nature call out to us every now and then, and they call out to us for good reason. And so if you have eyes to see those things, you can get insight into that sort of hidden world. Not necessarily, it's not really a predictive thing. So I haven't really ever met anybody that uses them to sort of foretell the future or anything like that. It's always a deeply personal experience, or in the case of healers, it's for the person that they're working on.
Hey, Brandon.
And there's a ton of them.
Hey, Brandon, your picture is really, really good. But we need to see a little bit more of you there. I'm going to take you out of the picture, and let's see if you can gather up a light, and then we're gonna get, and then we'll come back to you in just a second, okay? Meanwhile, all right. So Brandon's going to see if he can fetch a light to get a little bit lighter in his room there. And then for those of you who are watching the program, we have Brandon Weston on the show talking about Ozark healing. If you have a question about ancient healing methods found down kept alive by the hillfolk of the Arkansas Mountain range, just put it in live chat. And then I do see we have right here. And I think I'll wait till our guest gets back. He's going to attempt to get some more light so we can get to see him a little bit clearer. So we got that. So if anybody else I see that now North Carolina, if the cardinal is the official bird, does that make North Carolina the state of death? I mean, think about that. I don't want to know that. All right. Okay, well, it looks like Brandon might be back with us here in just a second. Got a little bit more light. Let me see bring him on back here as soon as he gets adjusted. And once he does there, we're trying to get him all lit up. Now he is in a room with wood paneling, and I tell you what, wood paneling will suck the light out of the room. So, but I got a lot of stories to talk to Brandon about, and there you go. Next week we're going to have with us Kathleen Martin. She's going to be talking about alien abductions, so be sure to come back from that. And if we haven't, and I did write down, some of you had some guest suggestions. I did write those down, so I will do some research and get them back on the line. And it looks like we have Brandon back with us, and the lighting is much better. Bam, there you are, Brandon. Hey, I'll tell you, and I'm the miracle of editing. We never even had this conversation. It won't be in the video. Okay, so somebody just wrote in, Brandon, talk about an omen. It said a bookcase in my house came crashing down the night before my grandpa died. Is that an omen?
Yeah, that would be a token. I mean, that the old timers would consider that a token anyway. So yeah, like I said, these are sort of unusual things that would happen in our lives as a result of, an experience with sickness or with death. There are a lot of death omens. So, bookcases crashing down, things like that. The red bird quacking out your window, butterflies, dragonflies are sometimes connected to death omens, things like that.
Yeah. Now, my wife connects with nature in such a way. Have you ever seen those big bumblebees? They're gigantic looking things. They're not talking about carpenter, but they're big. Well, if she sees one on the flower, she will go over and pet that bee. And I got video of that. Maybe I'll put it on the show sometime. But it's communing with nature now, and because really, aren't we talking about the healing methods, the prayers, and different, and the plants for that matter? There's a connectedness to nature that really is part of what you're saying. Is you're trying to reconnect to nature because and specifically, as I'm aware of the Ozark area itself, it's a poor part of the country. Yeah. That's the bad part. The good part is it's not been decimated with super Walmarts everywhere going through the mountains like that, and pop-up housing additions everywhere. So there's the plus side. I mean, that's when I was going through there, the first time I ever seen a roadrunner. I just thought that was a cartoon. And the wife said, "No, it's a roadrunner running down the road." I said, "No way! I thought it was a cartoon, man. I thought he was looking for that duck looking thing." But so you're but isn't that we're talking about reconnecting with nature in some ways?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a big part of Ozark Folk Magic and healing process in general is being able to connect with the natural forces of the world. So in Ozark folk belief, there is this sort of natural power of the universe, and most people traditionally believe that derives ultimately from God. And so this neutral power in the world can be manipulated. It can be used by certain people who are born with a gift, as they say. And so these individuals, they may not embrace that gift, but again, going back to signs and tokens, there are signs around their birth that might point to them having this gift, which will later manifest. So there are healers who traditionally they don't train with anybody. There are healers that will train at the knee of their grandma or parents, something like that. But what is ultimately required is this idea of the gift, this inborn gift. And really what that gift is a sort of mysterious connection to that natural magic in the world. You're almost like being born with a gift is like sort of being a radio. You're able to tune into these different frequencies and things, and actually translate them into songs to listen to, things like that. So you sift through that sort of static and then focus it into what is healing. And so yeah, it's all about nature, and it all goes back to our roots. Like you were saying, this area has been poor for a very long time, but that has given rise to a lot of our healing practices.
Right. They had to find an answer to
Absolutely.
that. Now, under another term, the biblical story of Pharaoh saying his magician said that there's a sign that the Messiah has been born, and there's a star, which is another sign under another name. Those would be omen to the Pharaoh. It was an omen that the guy that's going to come and overthrow his whole culture. And his command, of the whole area was going to be undermined by this, and so to him, it was an omen. So it's really not without precedent in that sense of the way. I've got another one for you. This one of the viewers says, "A chunk of metal hit my work truck windshield and bounced away this week." What kind of omen is that?
I mean, sometimes it's just a wake-up call. I've had omens in my own life. I was driving back from some rural area years ago after collecting a bunch of stuff, and I I don't even know quite what happened, but I guess I had dozed off or had zoned out or something on one of these mountain roads, and I remember driving and listening to some music, and then the next thing I remember, something hits my windshield, and it ended up being a bat hit my windshield as I was going into the ditch. Which, if you've driven through the Ozarks, the ditch is the holler. Like,
Yeah, that ain't a ditch.
Like you go off the road and you
don't come back, man. No.
Stop, you probably won't come back from that. And so I managed to, snap out of it, pull my car onto the road and keep going. And of course my heart was racing and everything. And, but yeah, so I fully believe that sometimes omens are just, I don't know who it was from, if it was from one of my guardian angels or, Granny or who it was from.
Well, speaking of that, my mother-in-law said that she was sitting in her bed perfectly still reading something, absolutely perfectly still, and a pin next to her spun around. Now her husband had died several years earlier. Was that an omen, or could that have been her husband giving a sign? Have people? Is it a thing that if you pass over? And I know a lot of people are going to dispute this probably, but do we ever get little notifications that it's okay on the other side?
Yeah, I believe that we do. So a lot of the work I do is, connecting to my own ancestors, connecting to those, not just ancestors of my blood, but what healers sometimes call ancestors of the work. And that's, healers who have departed in the past, and now, some people consider them angels or guardian spirits, or there's, lots of names for them. But so they can come through and they can give little signs of comfort, or, in my case, when I'm working with a client, or when I'm doing some sort of healing, a lot of times they'll give me signs of things are going okay, go in this direction.
Kind of an aside, just a memory flash just came in while you were talking. I went to the story of Wounded Knee, where the Indians were all rounded up and they were trying to communicate with their ancestors for wisdom. I mean, the white man had lied and stole from them their whole history, and breaking another treaty, and they were breaking that treaty, and so they're trying to. But the white soldiers thought they were doing a war dance, and so they were all skittish. And of course, some noise happened, and they started firing to kill them all. But I mean, Indians seem like they're always trying to contact their ancestors for wisdom. I don't know if they ever get through. I mean, possibly. But biblically, though, the Bible says that there are angels, messengers of God. And you talk about the bird, and I was kind of wondering in that particular case, can a messenger of God be in the form of an animal rather than say a human?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why not. I think that the understanding from, I guess, like more traditional Ozark viewpoint is that God is in everything. And so, messages from nature can be messages from God as well, because, God is present there. Whereas
that's
God
not that's not spooky stuff right there. The Bible itself says that God is in everything at all times. And it says he holds all things together by the power of his word. So God is simply in everything, or he wouldn't be God to begin with. So let's go ahead and go to another question. Smoke C says, Brandon, do you use any type of bark to heal?
So I think probably the most common one that herbalists use around here is wild cherry bark. I actually went through a bunch of wild cherry bark this last year because it's an expectorant. It helps with lung inflammation, specifically with wet coughs. So if you have a wet, phlegmy cough, it'll actually bond with the phlegm and help you pass it. Either by coughing it up, or sometimes it'll even help you pass it through your digestive system. So wild cherry bark is probably the most common one, but we have others. So the shagbark hickory, it's a hickory tree that you can actually tap for sugar, like you do maple for like a syrup. But it has these big scaly pieces of bark on it. You can pull those off and roast them a little bit, and it releases all those chemicals and sugars and everything. And then you boil it up, and it's great for colds. It's great for flu. It helps with stomach problems, stuff like that. So yeah, there's lots of barks. That's the one thing about the Ozarks is, we have such a high biodiversity here, and I've met healers who knew upwards of 500 individual plants and what exactly they are used for. I'm not that good. I know quite a few, but it's amazing to walk out into the forest with some of these healers and just sit with them, because they believe that for every illness there is an answer, and that can be plants or that can be prayers. I've met healers that don't use plants at all. They just use Bible verses and prayers.
Well, there certainly is something in nature. I mean, God directly addresses that, where he says that nature declares that there is a God, therefore all are without excuse to know that he exists. The nature, just look at nature, and you will find that only an intelligent super being of some sort with infinite wisdom could design such a biodiversity on this planet. Every day I find out some new thing about the planet, or plants or this or that. But by the way, I got a couple of wild cherries, and I was getting ready to cut them down because I was thinking, man, you're not giving me no cherries, because wild cherries don't have cherries, right? So I was going to cut them down, and one of them I put a wisteria plant there. I'm trying to think, well, since you're not really doing that, I'll have a wisteria climb up your big old nappy head, but no. But I was going to cut them down, but because I've talked to you, see if I've already decided that the wild cherry can stay. All right, here's another question for you. What role does water play in Ozark healing methods?
It's a huge part of healing, actually. That's a really good question. So a lot of the more magical healing traditions, or what we might call magic, what we're really talking about is the power of faith, this manipulation of the natural world. And so a lot of that involves cleansing. And so if somebody is sick, you're not only going to be focusing on healing the body, but you're going to be helping cleanse the soul, cleanse the spirit. And one of those methods is washing. So that can be, a bath in the house with special herbs and things like that. But more commonly with healers, they would take people out to the river. And there's a really powerful connection between that form of healing and baptism. It's almost like sort of that much of a spiritual experience for people to go out with a healer and just be washed in the river. And the idea is that, with the power of the healer being there present, the water can wash away any hidden illnesses. So you may have gotten rid of the disease, but the lingering effects of the disease can be washed off into the water and then carried away with the river.
Can you see my background?
Yeah.
Do you recognize that? Do you recognize that?
Yeah, that's the buffalo, I think.
Yeah, I looked that up just for this interview tonight. That was just a little test just to see if you really was in the Ozarks, man. As far as I know,
I think that's the buffalo. That's one thing about the Ozarks is we are water people, and we have rivers and natural springs and creeks everywhere. And so water is a very important part of the healing work. But also, certain healers have special water that they use for making medicine. So I've met healers that only use natural spring water that they collect from the spring in making their medicines, things like that. Sometimes they are that picky when it comes to their water. Speaking
of springs, you may not recognize this, but do you recognize this river right here? It's a spring. It's the Big Spring. The Big Spring in Arkansas. I looked it up, man. It is the world's largest freshwater spring, and it cranks out 307 million gallons of water per day from the underground spring. That is tremendous. Now, I'll tell you what, I would feel some healing power swimming around in that water coming up from the earth. There's also some things called, I don't know if they call it grounding or something, where you walk around barefooted, but man, it seems to be the same thing if you were in some water that comes right out of the earth. I just feel like it has medicinal properties in and of itself, so I'm very happy. By the way, I'm being advised right now to stop growing wisteria now before it takes over. So,
no, I was going to tell you the same thing. Wisteria is bad news.
oh man, oh it's crap, man. Those pretty little flowers going to kill everything.
Yeah,
Huh?
so as long as you keep it away from your house, because it'll tear off the siding on your house.
All right, well, that's going to bring us to another question. Rose says, has there been any strange occurrences or events in the Ozarks?
There's been a lot. So Ozark people, we're defined by our isolation. Early on, it was hillfolk families from the Appalachians that came, and they only came as family groups. So if you can imagine coming to strange forested mountains that hadn't seen white people, had only seen indigenous people for thousands of years, what that must have felt like to be in, complete darkness in the hills. And there's lots of eerie stories about strange creatures and things like that in the Ozarks. One of our famous cryptids, I guess, is the booger, which the name is traced back to the same root as boogeyman. Or bogey, and it's a shapeshifter. So some people believe that it's like people that harness magic for evil, witches, things like that. They can transform into these strange animals, and I know people that have seen them. And so there's lots of strange experiences.
I know there's only one man that can kill the boogeyman. You know who he is? John Wick.
Oh, yeah.
Because they said that he's the guy you send to kill the boogeyman. Just pointing this little movie trivia there. Okay, so now, and I saw somebody said they'd like to move to the Ozarks. I'm like a walking commercial for the Ozarks because I've been there many times, and it's just strange because it's like this whole area is in the United States. And in ways, it's like a place where time is forgot, which is the best thing ever, because who wants to come to this modern world, like I described with the Walmarts and the pop-up vinyl communities everywhere, and the anger and the road rage. I mean, you get down there, it's kind of isolated. Now, the Appalachians, the Smoky Mountains is kind of that way, but you've got those Gatlinburg and let's see. Let me think about some other cities around there. Pigeon Forge, which is the Chinese trinket capital of the world. Have you been to Pigeon Forge?
No. Yeah, well, I was going to say, we've been very lucky for a long time to have not had a lot of development, but it's quickly not becoming that. I mean, it's quickly changing. So I know. So, for instance, where my grandpa grew up, they had a kind of a homestead out in a place called Goshen, which is just east of where I live. And now Goshen is McMansions. Subdivisions and all of this other stuff. And 30 years ago, it was farmland and forests and stuff like that. So yeah, we're very lucky. We still have a lot of sort of state land that is preserved and state parks and things like that. But I don't know how long that's going to last.
Now that's also going to eliminate some of the biodiversity, and it's also going to move some of the cryptids. Okay, They're going to be moved out of their lairs down in there, and there's a lot of places for them to go, especially the caves. Now, have you been to some of those caves?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of caves. I've been to Blanchard Springs, Devil's Den around here. Lots of caves. And that actually, it all is kind of cycles back into each other because we have so much water here and so many natural springs because we have so many caves. It's called karst topography, and basically it's Swiss cheese underneath the Ozarks, just with caves and sinkholes. But because more and more people are doing pig farming and big livestock operations and things like that, all of that runoff and waste goes right into the water. It goes right into the groundwater. So it's getting harder and harder to find natural springs and water areas that aren't contaminated by fertilizers and growth hormones from chicken houses and all of that. It's becoming a problem pretty quick.
Okay, let's get to another question here from Put Yahweh First. Says, Brandon, do you have ginseng and wild ramp leeks there?
We don't have the ramps. We have what we call wild onions, but it's a wild garlic. I wish we had ramps because I love them. I have friends out in Appalachia that, they pick ramps and make them with eggs and stuff like that. We do have ginseng, but unlike in Appalachia, it's not as regulated. So unfortunately, it's very hard to find here, because when people do find it, they just pick all of it.
Well, let me ask you, this is something I heard a while back. So I attempted to grow some ginseng because it's extremely valuable.
Yeah.
And but I heard that the Chinese have picked clean their whole ginseng and their whole continent, and they've been coming over to the United States in our forest and getting the ginsengs in our forest. Have you heard that?
I don't think they are doing it, but it would not surprise me if they were hiring root diggers to dig it up. Because that's the whole thing. And I mean, in Appalachia, they have seasons on it, like you do hunting seasons, to regulate it. But, the people that are picking it aren't using it for self-consumption. They're selling it to energy drink companies. They're selling it maybe overseas. That wouldn't surprise me at all, but it's probably that they're hiring out local root diggers, things like that.
The old root digger, huh?
Yeah.
Better than a grave digger. I snagged this graveyard picture from your website there, and I figure you milling around the graveyard sometime. All right, hey, Jade, our moderator, asked this question for you, Brandon. Are there certain herbs that the mountain people always have in their diets?
Yeah, so traditionally, Ozark people kind of work on a seasonal basis, and the big time of the year for herbs is in the springtime. And that kind of goes back to, when people had very poor diets during the winter. They were eating canned meat or dried meat, lots of salt. Their digestive systems were horrible by springtime. So every family drank sassafras tea. And they drank it. It was considered a liver tonic, but when we hear liver, it's a different association. Liver, it goes back to the four humors system. So liver is connected to the blood. It's connected to the digestive system. So sassafras was sometimes called a blood thinner, but we're not talking about blood. It's a euphemism for a laxative. So sassafras tea would be drank in the springtime as a spring tonic to help get the body moving again. But other herbs were used too. Burdock root, dandelion root are both diuretics, so cleansing out the body, flushing the body clean.
Brandon, how close are you, if you had to go off the grid and live off the forest, are you anywhere near close, in percentage-wise? How much of your diet could you get from the forest?
I think a good deal could come from the forest because I'm a forager. So the only thing that I have trouble with, but I'm getting better, is foraging mushrooms. But that's one area that you really want to know what you're doing.
So I've heard.
You can end up pretty bad. But there's so much that the forest around here has to offer. I think if you know what you're doing, you can probably make up almost your entire diet between foraging and hunting.
The Smoky Mountains has a thin place known as Brown Mountain, and there's a thing that happens there. They call it the Brown Mountain Lights, and then that is that there are multiple UFO sightings there, disappearing people over the years from the Brown Mountain without a trace. In fact, one of my favorite all-time camping movies is called Alien Abduction, which is based on the Brown Mountain sightings and missing people and UFOs. Does the Ozarks have a thin place compared to that?
So one of the interesting things that I found, just like talking to tons of Ozark people, it everywhere feels very thin here. And that has been corroborated by lots of different people. I don't know what it is about the Ozarks, but there's something here. And no matter where you are, you kind of always have these strange experiences, especially when you get outside of town. So the folklorists have recorded some, we have what are called the spook lights up in Missouri, kind of around Springfield, which is, these areas where you see these strange glowing orbs and things like that. So there's stories about, things like that all over the Ozarks. But, when I go out to the mountains, I always get this feeling that everywhere is sort of this weird liminal space, this thin space. And that's what makes it, I'll probably never leave here. It's not just because it's my home, but because there's something here. And, it's worth exploring, and I'm still not done with that.
So personal event, love sharing stories. I was four-wheeling with my wife down in the Ozarks, and we were going down this trail, and we just kind of stopped, and all of a sudden, we both had to panic. And we were panicking. It was like, if we didn't know better, there was a killer, like right there, or a Bigfoot, or some kind of, we both had exactly, it's like, it just overtook us, and man, we were flying out of there, just, and we couldn't believe it. It's just like, it was very, this is nice, and all of a sudden, it's like it was a fight or flight type fear, and I'm just thinking that something came in the neighborhood, or we trespassed on some kind of cryptid's area there, man. So I do know that there is a kind of an alive feeling that the forest is alive in itself. Kind of reminds me of that movie Minority Report with Tom Cruise, where there's a lady that's able to kind of bring her plants to life, and they'll grab you, and that type of thing. Sounds like I'm going to get grabbed by crazy wisteria. All right, here's another question from Billy Strasser. He says, Brandon, any recommendations for neuropathy in the feet from sciatica?
Oh boy. So I think I would probably suggest maybe like some traditional, there's lots of different words for it, but chiropractic, something like that might help, especially when you're dealing with the spine. There's not a lot of herbs that I know of that can help rebuild that, but in the Ozarks, we call them bone breakers. And, it's traditional people that, they're a part of their healing work is getting those joints cracked open, and they, swear by that process. So it's kind of a folk version of chiropractic. But, I think that might be the only thing that would help.
So let me ask you something then. Now you say you've talked to healers, right?
Yeah.
Like so should I expect that they're living 110, 120? Man, how have they found a miracle cure to a long life?
Some of them have, I think. It's kind of mysterious. I've met people that live very hard lives out in the hills, and this one guy that I met, I would have sworn he was maybe in his 60s. And it turns out he was in his late 80s and still chopping his own wood and taking care of horses and all of this other stuff. And so Ozark people are very secretive, and it wouldn't surprise me if there was some healing springs or something that these people were visiting.
Well, Brandon, it's your job to find out where. I agree with you 100%, man. There are secret places out there, and nobody knows about them because the people that know where they are aren't telling. Even. I can't remember the guy's name. He's a Bigfoot hunter, well-known guy. He found a place out west somewhere where there's a lot of Bigfoot activity, and him and three other guys knew where it was. And so people withhold that information. It's our job to find out where it is. But then again, if everybody found out where it is, everybody'd be heading over there and it'd be a crowded place. Then we'd have to have a Walmart. Give us camping supplies.
especially in the Ozarks, Arkansas and Missouri both, we thrive on our tourist industry because we have so many natural areas. And so I've met people, and I'm kind of the same way, that we're fiercely protective of even swimming holes. People aren't going to tell you where to find your ginseng or where to find a good swimming hole, things like that, because we know that it'll be overrun by tourists if you do stuff like that. Ozarkers have always kind of had this, very secretive part of them. There's a famous Ozark saying, "We always lie to strangers." And
Whoa.
to some extent, that's kind of true. But
hang on now. Wait a minute. We always lie to strangers. Man, we're getting some good intel here about your hill folk down there.
Right. It's not to be rude. It's not to be, unfriendly or anything like that. But it's really, it's respecting the culture. And so people want to protect the culture. People want to protect things. And, if the key to getting in good with hill folk is being respectful, having manners. Say, if you come into somebody's house, you help them out with things that they need, things like that. And it's just the deep sense of hospitality that I think hill folk, Ozarkers in general, we just don't expect everyone to reciprocate. But if you do, you're in, and you'll have friends for life.
So wait a minute. So how can we be in with the in crowd? How can we do that now?
Respect.
Just respect. Respect the culture. Respect the land.
Absolutely. Yeah, respecting the land is really big because Ozark people have been hurt and burned so many times by friendly faces coming in and buying up a bunch of land and then clearing it all. We've had this long history with that, and so if that's a good way to show people that you're respectful is by respecting the land.
Well, I've seen a couple of people say in the live chat, please don't invite Californians.
So, no, well, we have enough of them here.
Oh boy.
Already.
Well, now so me and the wife were floating down one of those hidden mountain rivers, and I get caught in a vortex. I'm in this vortex, man, and I can't get out. She sees me. I'm struggling. She comes over there and grabs me by the arm and pulls me out of the vortex. Saved my life. It was a near-death experience. Later, I wanted to reenact the vortex near-death experience. And so we went up the river and couldn't find it. There was no vortex. There wasn't anything that looked like that vortex. It didn't even look like the area that we just came out of. I'm thinking, wait a minute, man. Did I just come out of another dimension? Or did I go in a dimension and find something hidden down in the bowels of your Ozark Mountains in there? And I think that's what it was.
You could have, yeah. I've known people that experience that very thing, these strange sort of river vortexes, lake vortexes, things like that. But then there's also, I felt this. I was down in a cave one time with some friends that enjoy spelunking. I'm not as into it, but I went along for the ride. But we kind of went into this open sort of big room area, and I felt a breeze coming from somewhere, but it wasn't blowing across me. It was blowing around me. Oh. It almost felt like a vortex. And so I shared my experience with some other people that I knew that had weird things go on in their lives and stuff like that. And they had felt the same thing in certain areas. And so that's one of those things that I point to and I say, there's something about the Ozarks, these sort of strange energies that are around that do these vortexes.
So have you specifically had an ailment, and we've had your book in the background several times, but have you specifically had an ailment that you went and got a natural remedy that for sure took care of it, not necessarily maybe you just believe that it did?
So I'm a big believer in plant remedies because plants contain chemicals and chemicals can help the body. So that's kind of my first line of defense against most illnesses is I take plant remedy compounds and stuff that I make. So I can swear by wild cherry bark for coughs. I can swear by elderberry, either as a tincture or as a tea, but I prefer it as a tincture. It's stronger. Elderberry is a really good immune system support. But then I've also had experiences with this spiritual healing as well. I had a fever one time when I was out in the mountains on a trip collecting information. I think it was probably related to the heat because it was summertime and I wasn't drinking enough water, but I had a fever and chills. It was 90 degrees out and I was shivering. And this lady that I worked with, she was a praying granny, and she sat with me and prayed for a few hours, fed me some home cooking, some chicken soup and stuff like that. And I don't know if it was just, just calming down and keeping cool and in the shade,
Right.
but I believe that the effectiveness of her prayers, of her magic, was really what helped.
Well, I like that. You said that she's using prayers and her knowledge of herbs and tinctures
Yep.
and things. So it sounds like a powerful remedy right
Yep.
there. In fact, this is probably one of the only programs that has an official granny in the live chat. She's been coming here for years, watching the show. So we have an official grandma that watches the program. Doreen 8951 says, Brandon, are there a lot of retired military in the Ozarks?
I'm not exactly sure. I know, I have retired military in my family. It is a place that a lot of people do retire to just because the land is relatively cheap. It's not, this past year has been really bad for all sorts of, land sales and real estate and all of that. But I don't personally know, but I do know of quite a few retired military.
Are there any underground military bases there?
I don't know, actually. None that I know of, but I'm not very familiar with it.
Have you ever heard of a place called Mountain View?
Yeah.
Because I was watching Jesse Ventura's conspiracy show that he had on years ago, and he said Mountain View has an underground military base. Me and the wife went looking for it. We never did find it, so I guess that's why it's still hidden.
I go out that area quite a bit. Mountain View it has the Ozark Folk Center there, so it's kind of been a tourist hub for Ozark culture and music and things like that for quite a while.
Well, next time you're out that way, do a little intel inquiry in that, and if you come up with anything, man, email me and let me know.
Yeah,
because that's been bugging me ever since. So have you seen any UFOs?
Yeah. So and it for me, I think probably because of the city lights, but I only have ever seen them when I'm out in very remote places. So places where you can still see the stars and things. So I don't know if our Ozark aliens are only interested in the rural areas or if what. But personally, I've seen 3 different occasions, and then I've seen some spook light sort of things, which some people consider to be UFOs, but they're ground level. They're not up in the sky usually.
Wow. Okay. Another question for you. Any suggestions for severe tendinitis?
Tendinitis. I don't personally have any remedies for it.
And I imagine that in the listing of ailments, which is probably quite lengthy. You'd have to have a much bigger book than what you're currently writing. So, and like I say, we have that book in the background right now. Is that what is in that book?
So I really wanted this book to be a lot of theory behind and history of Ozark folk magic, but it does have a practical section to it too. So the first part is kind of history of the Ozarks, but I'm not a historian, so it's from a very personal perspective. It's about me, it's about my family, about Ozark people. But part of the problem is that nothing has been written about Ozark healing traditions from a practitioner. So the things that have been written, they oversimplify everything or just call everything superstitions. And in the reality, there's such a complex system behind all of these healing practices that I really wanted to bring all of that up. I wanted to show people that, outwardly our practices might seem very simple, but the underbelly is very complex. So the first part of the book is theory and history, but I intersperse in stories and all of that. The second part of the book is some practical things. It goes through plants, common healing plants. So I list both the medical and magical uses of the plants. So if you want to use them for medical purposes, or if you want to use them as a part of, faith healing, prayer, things like that. And then I also talk about repurposed household objects that are used in healing too. So traditionally healers, you might sweep a person clean of illness like you sweep your house clean. So using brooms, using knives to symbolically cut illness off of a person.
Okay, Brandon, let me stop the show for a second.
Okay.
I got a question. This here's my guitar. I'm going to play a little tune. I want to know, if I'm traveling in the Ozarks, am I going to hear this tune?
Fine. Probably not from an Ozark.
I'm not going to hear that, am I?
No. No. And if you do, it's not going to be from an Ozarker.
It'd be from me if I get down there. So, all right. As long as I don't hear that tune when I go down there.
No, you should be good.
Okay. Because I saw a couple of people in the live chat wanted to know. Okay.
No. Yeah, you might hear somebody playing it, but no hillfolk.
Okay. We're not gonna hear no squealing.
We
down there.
We have a lot of good music. I mean, folk music is a really big thing here, but it's it's traditional Ozark folk music, and lots of fiddles and fretless banjos and.
Does anybody play the jug?
Yeah, I mean I've seen people play the jug.
And then the spoons. There's like spoons.
Yeah. Spoons and also bones. People use rib bones as like these clacking rhythm instruments. So usually pig or deer bones, not human rib bones.
Well, this wouldn't be the show if I didn't ask this question here. Have you had any experiences with Bigfoot down there?
Personally, I hate to say I have not had any Bigfoot experiences. Now, I know of people that have. The Ozarks, I mean, supposedly we have quite a few sightings. We also have our own Arkansas sort of Bigfoot, not in the Ozarks. It's down south where it gets kind of flat and swampy, the Fouke monster. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Fouke monster.
Yeah. Out of Faust, Arkansas. Man, down the swampy area.
Yeah. So Legend of Boggy Creek was the movie that featured that, but it's kind of a Bigfoot type creature. I know some people have claimed it's actually same species.
Well, we are talking about healings and medicines and magic and folklore from the Ozarks. Have people been? And I don't know if we should use the word healed. Sometimes you get in trouble saying that, but from music.
From music, yeah.
Because I noticed you have a CD on your website, right?
Say what?
You have this CD. Is this a CD on your website?
I don't have a CD.
Oh, okay. Well, I just saw this on your website. It looked like a CD cover.
Oh, is it the full and new moon healing?
Yeah.
So those are sessions that I do.
Okay.
So I do new and full moon healing sessions. I started doing them remotely during the pandemic, and people have just kept it going basically.
Well,
but they're sort of remote healing sessions, spiritual healing sessions.
Well, now you just opened a Pandora's box, or you just went into a spooky cave with what you said. Is the hill folk down there, they taking kindly to the jab?
It's mixed. I think. Like the rest of the country, I think we're kind of divided about it. I know some hill folk that are very adamant about getting it. I know some hill folk that are adamant about not getting it. So I think we're kind of in the same controversy as everywhere else. Historically, Ozark people have not liked doctors or medical professionals in general at all.
I don't like them either.
And, there's good reason behind it. For a long time, country doctors in the Ozarks were actually killing people. They were doing much more harm than they were doing good. And so it's kind of one of those things that I understand why my grandparents had such a distrust for doctors and things like that, and still kind of do.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Ozarks, we didn't have medical professionals for so long, and when they came in the early 1900s, late 1800s, they were country doctors that had pretty much, maybe 2 years of university, but it wasn't really, it's not the universities that we have today. Most of them didn't even know anatomy. They didn't know it. They learned more from the hillfolk healers than they had, coming into it. So hillfolk have always kind of had a bad relationship with doctors, but we've always loved pharmacists for some reason.
Which is from the root word pharmacia, which means magic.
Yep.
But I've met older people that have a fear or even a phobia of going into hospitals in their later years because they just feel like if they go in, they're not going to come out. I mean, of course, what is a hospital but a bastion of everybody's diseases? And so, man, you pick something up there. But, as far as the mix of jabbers and non-jabbers, that's pretty much standard across the country. I think everyone needs to respect everybody else's opinions, on that. It divides people. And so there's another thing we need, right? Another topic to divide people. And it seems like all we ever do is come up with reasons to divide each other. Man, who knows what? See, if this is my world, I would make the whole country like the Ozarks. Here in Indiana, I've always had a vision. We have these dead highways with just grass that we pay all these people to cut all year long. But you can go to Oregon or somewhere, and they got forest right up to the highway. Why can't we have forest in the middle of the highway and on the sides of the highway? But no, I can't live in that world because they won't let me have that world. But I would say less building and more natural type environments, more forest type residences for everyone, but I got off my soapbox there. Let's get some more questions. Do they wear, and I guess this is, I don't know. Do you guys wear masks down in the Ozarks?
Yeah. So, it depends on the area. Where I live, there was a mask ordinance, but all of that's been lifted. The Arkansas governor lifted it apart from, so private businesses can still require it, but most places around here, they're not requiring it anymore.
Is there any hill folk remedy for cooties 19?
So it's an inflammation issue. I know some pretty cool herbalists in the Ozarks that have been doing scientific research on herbal remedies and for stuff, a lot of stuff, and including COVID-19. But what they're telling me is that I don't personally have any remedies, but what they're telling me is that it's predominantly an inflammation issue, and so they are throwing anti-inflammatories at it and having a lot of success.
And you got to be careful too. There was a alternative broadcaster that was sort of marketing, I don't know, it was colloidal silver or something to that, and mentioned that it does something with Cooties 19, and they got investigated, and they were threatened to throw them in jail for even saying that, and they had to kind of rephrase everything. So you got to really be careful. It's like, can't even touch that.
And, the people that I know that are herbalists who have been working with it, they're working with the symptoms to help relieve the symptoms, which I think in a lot of cases is maybe the best that you can hope.
So me and everybody watching the show, we're out there walking in the wilderness right now in the mountains, and I'm getting really tired. What do we need to get some energy? What do we take out of the forest to give us some energy?
Well, ginseng, if you can get your hand on it. So there's other sort of stimulant beverages. Spice bush, Lindera benzoin.
Oh, spice bush. Okay.
Spice bush is it's a natural stimulant. It doesn't contain caffeine or anything like that. If you can get your hand on yaupon holly, which sometimes grows around here, but it's more sort of swampier, hotter
Hmm.
climate, I guess. But Yaupon is a caffeine-containing plant.
Wow.
It's in the holly family, so it's related to our holly bushes that you put out as
Hmm.
ornamentals and things like that. But it's a Yaupon holly, and it is I think it's the only actual caffeine-containing native plant in the U.S.
Wow. Never heard of
And
it.
the indigenous people used to use it as a part of ceremonies, and it just never caught on with the colonists for whatever reason. They like their British tea a lot better, I guess. But if anybody's ever heard of yerba mate is also a holly that contains caffeine, and they're related.
Hmm. When you go deep down in the hollers out there, are there any people that got stills?
Yeah, yeah. So it's illegal. Okay, I should say owning the still is not illegal. The distilling of alcohol is illegal
Mm.
in Arkansas. But there are people that still have them. I won't tell you where, but
Brandon,
I've seen some.
have you partook?
Of course, yeah.
Okay, good, good. Just checking, man. Just see if you're a normal
I
person.
mean, yeah, you have to.
You have
Good
to partake because, like you say, you got to respect the land. You got to
Yeah.
respect the still,
Yeah,
and you
absolutely.
respect the still by partaking in the still product.
Absolutely. Well, and yeah,
I'm getting this.
I mean, a part of hillfolk hospitality is you eat everything on the plate.
Mhm.
No matter what they give to you. And my family's a lot like this. It's just it's a part of that hospitality. Is we're going to make sure you're fed. We're going to make sure you have plenty to drink, whether it's
Mhm.
moonshine or whatever. And a part of that mutual respect is partaking of it.
Wow, that sounds great, man. Just the hominess of that here. Somebody wants to know: are there any Ozark Indians?
Well, so the Osage were here up until the Indian Removal Act in the early 1800s. So the Osage were here from about 1500 until about 1820 when they were removed. Before that, it was Caddo land.
Mhm.
So the Caddoan culture was here. We do have I haven't done a lot of research on it, but we do have what have been called bluff dwellers, who seem to be a group that
Wow.
predate the Caddoans, and they built their settlements underneath these giant bluff overhangs that you see all throughout the Ozarks. So yeah, some bluff overhangs like in that picture even maybe. And so they, based upon the artifacts that have been discovered, a lot of them are protected. So this is another area where hill folk
Hmm.
respect areas like this.
Hmm.
Highly respect areas like this. They won't take things from them, things like that. But so a lot of them are very secretive where
Hmm.
these areas are.
Hmm.
But it seems the bluff dwellers predate even the Caddo. So yeah,
Uh,
quite a bit.
are you saying there's people living in the hills that not are off the grid?
Well,
Nobody
yeah,
knows they're
yeah.
there.
There's lots of people that are off the grid. Yeah, yeah.
Nice.
I mean, they're harder. They're harder to find than they
And,
used to be.
until they get a cell phone, then they're no longer off
Yeah,
the grid.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it's hard because a lot of the families that 20 years ago didn't even have electricity. They have kids, and the kids get connected to town culture and all of that, and kind of pull their family in.
Hmm.
So it's getting harder and harder to find. A lot of people a lot of Ozarkers even are going back to the land, which is exciting. I encourage
Hmm.
that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd rather somebody who respects the land getting it back before a developer gets in there and takes it away.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Yeah.
but let's get to another question here. It says, do you have Ozark Mountain oysters there?
Ozark Mountain oysters. Now, is that like the Rocky Mountain oysters?
I don't know, man. But hey, this is interesting though. I may have told this to the last guest but this is really for you because you're an Ozarkian, okay? So we're riding our ATV through the mountains, and we cross this little bridge in the middle of nowhere. When we come back, that bridge had line. It was lined, and it was not like a bridge like you think. It was a concrete low to the river, and frequently when the water rises, it goes right over that. So it was more like just I don't know what you call it. But anyway, it had a ledge on each side, and on those ledges, rocks were stacked. And then down in the river bank area, and you know how many rocks are in Ozark Mountain rivers, like
Oh yeah.
trillions and trillions. I don't know
Yeah.
where they come from. You can't get rid of them. People, they scoop them out, but they'll come back. But anyway, but they were stacked. And nobody had the time to take the time to stack them in that time. And but first of all, with all of just kids, and then like later thinking, wait a minute. In the time we were gone, there's no way no human could have stacked those rocks because they were round rocks on top of flat rocks on top, and they were just everywhere. It may take an army of people with the patience as Job, man. I mean, there's no way. What do you think could account for that?
I don't know. It could be one of those weird energies. It could have been something playing with you. I don't know. It sounds like so I've encountered things like that before, but they've all been human made, and I knew they were human made. People, they like to stack up those stones into little cairns and things along the rivers. Sometimes it's used to mark trails and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, if something appeared seemingly out of nowhere in a short amount of time, I think my professional opinion about it is that there was something spooky messing with you, maybe.
When you talk about Ozark Folk Magic, are you referring to magic, or are you referring to the wonderful ingredients that God's provided in the plants to bring healing to us? Or are you talking about magic as if a certain power of some kind?
So that's a good question. I mean, there's kind of a lot of different levels to it depending on who you're talking to. So I use the word magic just because my readership for the book, the people that attend the lectures and things like that, we kind of have an understanding of what magic is. Magic meaning this sort of innate power, this innate connection to maybe this natural energy and being able to manipulate that energy in certain ways. But if you're talking to old timers in the hills, magic traditionally has always had the connotation of witchcraft and evil. So when I was out collecting, material and remedies and prayers and everything, I had to adjust my language. I couldn't say magic. So people that, the people that practiced with certain rituals or using certain prayers or, making what we might call magical amulets, things like that, we can apply all of these terms to it, but they themselves would have never used any of those terms. If somebody heals using prayers, they're praying for someone. They're not using magic. They're using prayer.
Well, the Roman Catholics have their prayer beads, and then they all run around rubbing them and stuff. And they're saying, what was that word? Hail Mary, Mother full of grace, as if it has a magic power of protection. Of course, Roman Catholics, again, have a long history of having certain statues and certain holy people that they pray to for protection and whatnot, So, I mean, there's that. But there's also, and I'm not making a case for magic as far from the dark side, but when Jesus was born in Bethlehem, the Magi was with him. The Magi were magicians, and it says that God delivered Jesus and his family and the Magi out of Egypt. So, so I think maybe it goes to intention. Like I said earlier, we use different words, and it conjures things in our mind as as particularly evil or not, and maybe it's just struggling for a description of what's actually going on. But you wouldn't consider yourself a Satanist, I suppose, right?
No, I wouldn't. No, and traditionally in the Ozarks, there's a separation the thing that separates the healer from the witch who supposedly uses black magic and things like that is that the healer always heals and the witch always harms. So traditionally there's this sort of stereotypical view of witches as being the people that sort of manipulate that neutral energy in the world for evil. And the healer is somebody that manipulates that energy for good, for healing purposes. And a lot of traditional healers are very strict about their gift, their power to do this comes directly from God, and no one in between. And the sort of the tall tales about witches and things like that has said, that the witch steals their power, or they, make a pact with the devil, things like that. Mm-hmm. I think the reality of the situation, as far as I've been able to tell, even, with old timers and traditional healers and things like that, is that more often than not, the witch was just a part of tall tales. Witch was used as a way of marginalizing people, removing them from the community. There was a very fine line between being a healer and a witch, and a lot of times it was just, one accusation in the community mm-hmm. from a dissatisfied customer could land you in hot water.
Well, it certainly landed a lot of people in, say, Massachusetts in hot water, as hysteria took over and everyone was being accused of being a witch. So that's kind of sad there. But I'm just wondering, when the Bible says life and death are in the power of the tongue, and if you say unto this mountain, be thou picked up, be thou cast into the sea, it should obey. If somebody didn't know that was scripture, wouldn't they call that magic?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a fine line there between, I think it's all semantics. It's our language. It's how we're able to sort of interpret these things. And so I've seen some things that people attribute to faith and prayer and that sort of power, that if I didn't know that context, if I hadn't grown up in that context, I might say it was magic.
What is the context of you growing up there, if you don't mind me asking, Brandon?
Yeah, so my family, I grew up in the church. We were Nazarene at the time, and growing up, I left for college. Me and my brother, we kind of explored around to different areas, things like that. But I think for me, as well as a lot of other traditional Ozark healers, at least considering the power of the Bible is very important. And that rubs some modern magicians kind of the wrong way sometimes, mm-hmm. but it's such a deeply ingrained part of the culture that I've met healers that only use the Bible for their healing methods. They only use Bible verses and prayer. And I've also met healers that use the Psalms for healing, things like that, but they don't consider themselves necessarily churchgoers, things mm-hmm. like that. Mm-hmm. But it's still a part of the cultural identity. And so I have another book coming out next year that's going to be a lot of the remedies, the prayers, things like that, the stuff that I couldn't put in this book. And as a part of that, each remedy or ritual that I give, I list a Bible verse that I've collected from healers associated with that work, because I feel like there are people that want to work in that way, and it's a traditional way to work. So there's some things that I still use Bible verses and things like that, even though I don't consider myself as a part of that religion anymore. But it's such a big part of my cultural identity that I think it's important to incorporate.
Mm-hmm. When you said earlier that Granny was praying for you and giving you some herbs and getting you all healed up, can you remember what type of prayer? I mean, did she say God or Jesus, or what was your feeling and remembrance of that?
So she was reading specifically from the Psalms, and she sang them. So there's I don't know how common it is, but I've encountered it with some of these old churches, that there's this sort of long tradition of singing the Psalms. In Appalachia, it's called lined out. So LINED out, lined out psalmody, or lined out psalms, and it comes from Scots Gaelic, comes from Scotland, and basically it's an ancient tradition of chanting the Psalms. Mm-hmm. And so people would do it during church services, things like that, but then country folk kind of, they had such a spiritual experience with it in church, they would sometimes bring it home, and every time they were in trouble or afraid, they may sing out some of these psalms. Mm-hmm. And so that's what she did for me, is she just went through the Psalms. I don't remember if she went in a certain order. Sometimes there are certain psalms mm-hmm. that people use for certain things. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I do remember it was the Psalms, and I do remember she sang it, and it was very powerful.
Okay. Now, do you pray yourself?
Yeah, so I have I guess a meditation routine. I kind of found my way to the Quakers. So I'm a Quaker, and for Quakers, we sort of pray in silence. We don't use a lot of words and things like that. And so some people from the outside, it looks like meditation, but really it's this idea that sometimes you can't really express everything you want to express with words. And so when you reach that point, sometimes just sitting in the silence is, so much more than you could have said. So I think for me, that is a big part of my routine. And actually, that's a big part of my healing work as well. So sometimes when I'm working with a client, we may just sit in silence and have that sort of connection. Or other times I might have certain prayers, things like that I use. But there are specific rules that go along with that sort of stuff.
I may not be quoting the history just right, but I believe that originally the Quakers may have been known as the Shakers. And
so the Shakers were actually an offshoot from the Quakers.
Okay. And the reason they called them the Shakers because they basically shook, right?
Yeah, and it's the same thing with the Quakers. It's actually called the Religious Society of Friends.
Right.
That's our official term.
Right. But where I was going with that is other sects of Christianity called them possessed of the devil.
Yeah.
And then you have people that speak in tongues, as they say. The people that don't say they got a devil. And then the people that speak in tongues say you got a devil if you don't speak in tongues. I mean, I just can't get over why we can't. I want to say we all get along. It's like there's no room for variance, and everyone thinks they have the exact truth. I mean, I already understand that people have suggested that that you're a conjurer. Not everybody. I just an occasional glimpse of a sentence, but in general, I'm not really getting a feel how you're getting received with this market type of thing. But there is.
I get mixed opinions all the time, so
that's probably the best. That's probably the best way to be when you're getting mixed opinion. I mean, I've been accused of having a devil for having people on. It's, different points of view. It's not that I agree with everything I hear. I want to hear people's stories and what they say, so I just try to get away from this. Everybody has a devil. Yeah. If they, find a herb or something, or talk to a tree, or not everybody has devils like. Everyone else, it's like if you don't believe, and this goes back to what I said earlier about another thing that we're divided over. You use word magic, and all of a sudden you're going to have half the audience throwing holy water at you and trying to cast the devil out of it. And then others may say, "Well, let's hear what he had to say," and others say, "Oh, that sounds good." I mean, so if you're getting it from all sides, I guess that's the best we can hope for in today's world. I'm like I told I think I told him last week. There's this guy on YouTube. His name's Jamal, and he's an African American who's listening to 70s music for the first time, and he's giving his opinion in the YouTube videos for the first time of hearing that music. And a lot of it's from white groups, but he's like totally amazed. He can't believe he missed that music. He's ended up saying he's been born in the wrong decade because the words were so beautiful of those earlier songs. But he said, what I'm here for is I want to bring people together, and I'm trying to do it with music. And so in certain ways, I'm trying to bring people together, even by having you on and other guests that are diametrically opposed to everything you said tonight. And I don't even know what you said tonight is really controversial. A lot of times, if it's not controversial, I'll crank it until it gets controversial. Because that's my show, and I kind of have fun doing that, and everybody knows that. But no, I do appreciate you coming on the show, and we're getting near the end there, Brandon Weston. What kind of final thoughts you got for us?
Well, so I mean, I really thrive on people asking questions and people who are interested, and even if it kind of seems controversial, I want to talk to people about that, and I want to educate people about the Ozarks and where I'm from. This is my home. And it's been misrepresented for so long. If if you think I, am doing something wrong, things like that, let's talk about it. And I'm completely open to doing that. I think I was really apprehensive publishing the book because there are people in my own family who I know will never read it because they think it's devil work. They think it's witchcraft, even though, when you read the book, I address all of these things. I address the questions about how people can be Christian and still practice these things. So the thing that I can really suggest is, give it a chance. And if you have questions, it's important to find answers, or at least, the journey to find those answers is important. And so I'm always open to, if people want to contact me or whatever. I do have a website, ozarkhealing.com. And I have a contact form on there if you have any questions or concerns in the audience. What really excites me is when I see specifically Ozarkers, but people in general who are excited about this, because for too long people have been, buried under the hillbilly stereotype. I was there, I grew up wanting to separate myself from that until I figured out how cool my culture was. So, if there's any Ozarkers out there listening, and you want to connect with me and talk about the Ozarks, I'm always happy to do that.
Well, I'll tell you what, Brandon, I'm an Ozarkian in my heart, man. I've been there and I love the place, and I appreciate you coming on the Edge broadcast tonight. I'll send you links after the show. Can we have you on again sometime when you get that new book?
All right. All right.
Okay.